Hey there, crewmates. Gabe from Nexus Core back finally once again with another One Piece video. So today, as of February 3rd, Starter Deck 5, the film Starter Deck for Purple, has finally been released. So I'd like to thank Paper Hero Games here in Los Angeles for being kind enough to supply these to me day of release and recording. And if anyone is in LA, I highly recommend going to Paper Hero Games. It is a fantastic location and a fantastic game store. So I'd like to also, before we begin, apologize for if you look at the date of last recording, the phenomenal drought in content. I said I would be uploading more, and that was clearly a lie. So will I upload more? At this point, who's to say? But also, as of the day of recording, we finally got the full spoiler list for Set 3, so you're going to at least get 6 videos out of me before I quit talking about this game. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm only going to open one of them right now, because it's a starter deck, so they have the exact same content, so you guys get literally nothing out of me opening 2 on camera, besides hearing me trying to pad out the run time for a little longer. So, I'm actually gonna be honest here, I'm kind of indifferent about this. I picked it up because I do have a Kaido deck, and there are some good purple staples in here that are worth mentioning, but the pure film deck for purple isn't that impressive. There isn't a whole lot for it in the meta. Part of me is building it for content, but also to support my local game store. But because they gave it to me for a pretty good price, and I have both, I'll probably do a deck profile at some point, just because at this point I have the card, so I lose nothing. So here we have the usual starter deck contents with an absurd amount of Dawn, that because they also come in every booster pack, I have too many of these things floating around. I love playing Magic the Gathering and have too many basic lands. So first, as usual, we get 10, went a bit too far there. So first we have the leader Shanks, who is your average monocolor leader, so 5k, 5 life, slash attributes. Active during the main phase, go Dawn -3. All of your film characters get 2k. This is very, very unimpressive. I'm kind of inclined to say bad. I think Bandai is too scared of giving purple a good monocolor leader after Kaido for some reason, because first off, Dawn -3, it's not super hefty, but the problem is, as we'll find out later, Film doesn't have his own Onigashima, so Dawn ramping is certainly going to be a bit of an issue for this effect. As well, giving 2k to your characters isn't great, because it's kind of just a worse Zoro. It gives 2k instead of 1, sure, but Zoro doesn't need to go Dawn minus, and Zoro all he has to do is attach 1 to himself, so he can still at least get some power out of its own effect. So you're kind of having to spend a lot more for 1k than really it's worth. This could have been Dawn -2, and I honestly think it would have been fine. But regardless, it will be the leader for a pure film deck. So next we have the SRs. So the first one we have is Uta, who is, despite my complaining about Shanks, Uta is a very good card. So she is a 4/5 counter 1 blocker. And on block, you can go Dawn -1 to rest one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 5 or less. So this is genuinely fantastic. This is great against red. This is great in a mirror match against anything purple. This is really, really good. It has a good stat line. It has a good Dawn minus effect. And the fact that it is a blocker with an on-block effect that's this good is very good. This is also why I picked up 2 starter decks, because you only get 2, but she's definitely a 4 of in most purple builds. So next is Douglas Bullet, our next super rare, also coming in at 2 copies. So is an 8/10 active during the main phase, go Dawn -4. You can rest 2 of your opponent's characters with a cost of 6 or less, then he gets double attack. I've complained on the channel about double attack before, because a lot of the time it can be stapled on weak characters, but because it's a 10k, this is far from weak, and it also is able to rest potential blockers on top of it. So this is quite good. It's definitely going to be run in a pure film deck solely because this is your finisher. You don't really need it in Beast Pirates, because even though you have Onigashima to ramp, you have access to all of the Kaidos. So honestly, you don't really need it in those builds. This is definitely worth it in a blue-purple crocodile build, which hopefully I can actually get around to building, because this is also a good finisher for that build. So this is another card that outside of Kaido, you're probably going to want this at a decent amount of copies. But on to the rest of the deck. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 copies of Ain, who is the Neo Navy. So she was the support for Zephyr in Film Z. Her effect is on play, get a Dawn from your Dawn deck and rest it, and she has a 4/5. This is a 4 of because it is Dawn ramping in the deck that doesn't have Onigashima. It's kind of unfortunate that it has to come in as rest. I understand that it's free, and something like Jack, who is also on play, comes in with it active. I wish Ayn would reduce her power by 1 just so it could come in as unrested just to get a little more out of it. But it's free Dawn ramp, which is never worth complaining about. Next, we have 4 copies of Anne, who is the announcer lady from Stampede, who is a 2/3 blocker. She's just another low to the ground blocker. We don't really need that in Kaido because we have both Higurashi and Black Maria, so we really don't need copies 9 through 12 of a low blocker. But because she is a blocker with the film attribute, which is important, she's definitely a 4 for a pure film deck. Next, we have 2 copies of Karina, who is a 2/3 counter 1000. During the main phase, you may rest this character, trash a film from your hand. If you have less Dawn than your opponent, you can add 2 cards from your Dawn deck and rest them. Kind of a shame you only get 2 of it in one star deck, because this is definitely a 4 of. I do think this is also a bit restricting, because first you have to rest her and discard 1, and already have less Dawn than your opponent, and they still come in as rested. Whereas again, something like Jack, you still have to discard 1, and while you only get 1, it comes in as active, and you don't have the prerequisite of needing to have less Dawn. This is easily going to be a 4 because you get to ram 2, and if your opponent doesn't attack into her, she's recurable, but because of her low stat line, your opponent is probably going to want to kill her. But this is definitely a 4 of in a pure film deck. Next, we have 2 copies of Guild Tesoro, who is a 5/6 with 0 counter. On attack, go Dawn -2 to draw 2. This is fine. It's this deck's equivalent of Queen, and while I think this is also, again, to keep complaining, a bit of a worse version of Queen, because Queen has blocker stapled, and while Queen does have the discard for its effect, and it is on place as opposed to on attack, so it isn't recurable, having the blocker and having counter 1000 is very good. But again, pure film, this is definitely worth running at multiple copies just because it's the advantage. Next, we have 4 copies of Gordon, who is a 1/3 counter 1000. He's your just average vanilla. Next, we have 2 copies of Shiki, who is a 6/7 counter 1000. If you have 8 or more Dawn on your field, it cannot be KO'd in battle. This is quite solid, and funnily enough, quite good in a pure King deck. And it's a decent stat line that not being able to be killed by battle is actually quite helpful, especially because nothing can hit 6k or cost 6,000s yet. So until we get Black, which was reducing cost, this being able to not be KO'd in battle on a 7 body is actually quite helpful. So this is definitely solid. Next, we have 4 copies of Scarlet, who is a 2/3 counter 1000 vanilla, whose triggers you can play this card. I haven't looked at a deck list yet, so I don't know. I feel like you're going to cut this just because it's a vanilla with not a good stat line for the vanilla. As we've come to see in most builds, having trigger stapled isn't really worth it. Next, we have Zephyr, who is a 7 cost 8k 0 counter. When this character battles a strike attribute character, this gets 3k. So if your opponent has a striker that you really want to take out, something like a Kaido perhaps, this makes it very easy. As well, during the main phase, you can go Dawn -1 to give it an additional 2k. So it's a 8k that can become a 10k and potentially even higher if you attack a striker. This is pretty solid. I think it's worth it just as a beater. Next, we have 4 copies of Baccarat, who is a vanilla, so 3/5 counter 1000. Again, she's just a vanilla, not really much more to say about that. Next, we have another vanilla, which is Bins, who is at 4, who is a 4 cost 6k power counter 1000, just a vanilla. Next, we have finally a card that's actually worth talking about, who is Buena Festa. Festa, funnily enough, is going to be replacing Orochi in most Kaido builds just because it has the same line of 1 cost 0k, counter 2000. His effect is on play, check the top 5, reveal a film type other than himself, add to hand, bottom the rest. Because Kaido will be running film cards like Uta, this is actually more worth it to see play if you really want to play something. Funnily enough, because it has 0k, it can hit Momo, or with a single Dawn hit Bonnie. I'm unsure of how I feel about this. Part of me wishes it was your average, like, Nami clone, where it was a 1-2 with counter 1000. At the very least, switch the numbers where it had 1 power 2 counter, because 2 counter is obviously amazing, but having 0 power for an on-play effect isn't great just for wanting to keep it. But purple can pump stuff off, so it might actually not be that big of a deal, especially with Shanks making it a 2k base. Next, and last for characters, we have Dr. Indigo, who is our vanilla at 2-4 counter 1000. So onto the events, we do get quite a few actually. First, we have our 3-cost event, which is Lion's Threats Imperial Earth Bind. Main Dawn -2, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 5 or less, and trigger add a Dawn from your Dawn deck and set it as active. I think this is actually pretty decent and is probably worth looking into for a film deck, solely because being able to hit a thing that costs 5 for Dawn -2 is not bad by any means. But at the same time, Brachio Bomber exists, which while it has double the cost, it also gives you Dawn as opposed to taking it away, so I'm not totally sure, but this doesn't actually seem half bad to me. And then we have our protective event, which is Union Armada, 2 cost, counter up to one of your film type leaders or characters gets 4k. Then, if it's a character, it cannot be KO'd during this turn, and trigger add a Dawn from your Dawn deck as active. I think this is quite decent. It's a 4k counter, which is always decent to have, but being able to permanently protect a character for the turn, if you have something integral like the aforementioned Karina to continuously reuse her, this seems like it would actually be quite good. So overall, my thoughts are, I'm not super impressed by pure film right now. I know we get some film support in set 2, which might change things, but I think right now, you're kind of playing a mildly worse Zoro, if I'm being honest. And granted, Zoro, probably not the standard we should be setting things to, because Zoro is a very, very good leader, but also because Zoro exists, we probably should be comparing it to the aforementioned deck. The deck it seems like its problem is you have so many Dawn minusing effects, and while they're not massive, like the Kaido leader's Dawn -7, or the board wipe Kaido's Dawn -6, or the 9 drops -5, everything is in increments of like 2 or 3. Because you have so many small Dawn minusings, it seems like you are losing too much, and this deck really could use an Onigashima clone. And it's kind of disappointing that it doesn't have one, especially because it is being juxtaposed to the deck with Onigashima. I feel like this would have been fine to give it one, because Kaido's whole thing is massive Dawn minusing for massive sweeps, whereas Shanks would be a bunch of small ones that the minus would build up over time. So I think having no Onigashima is really what's setting the deck behind. But those are just my thoughts. Please let me know what you think down below. Let me know. I know I've been complaining. If you are excited for this deck, personally, my opinions on One Piece are basic. I love Shanks. He's so cool. I have the card, so I'm probably going to build the deck regardless. And again, I've been having a massive drought in content, but I am hopefully going to be getting a microphone and at least a decent camera soon, so hopefully I can actually start recording things of interest to everybody. So let me know what you want to see in terms of paper. Let me know if you want to see physical deck profiles, if you would like to see gameplay, anything at all that you would like to see from me to keep the channel going. Please let me know what you'd like to see. But with all of that in mind, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.